Hey everybody, welcome back to American Government and Politics at Simmons College. My apologies for this video being a day late, and I'm also back on the recording device I've used in the past, which is much more user-friendly, but tends to freeze on the video sometime. But as long as the audio is going, it should be good, but I appreciate your patience and bearing with me through those little annoying challenges. Speaking of challenges, I hope that the semester is going well for you all so far. I know that for many of you, if not most of you, this is your second semester of remote learning, distance learning at Simmons College, and I know that I can speak for all the faculty members that I know for sure. We're very grateful that you all are still watching these videos, or however your different professors are having you participate in class. It's so great that you're still doing that, and that you're so dedicated to your studies. Speaking of studies, I'm going to talk about the judicial branch of the federal government. That's the federal court system today. But before we get to that, I owe you one more apology, and that's because I just missed a comment that one of you posted on a previous video, and it was a great question. And it's not directly related to class today, but I do want to address it because it's a really interesting question. It's going back to, I believe, the first video that I posted for this class, and I talked about, I did a very, very brief overview of the difference in federal and state crimes, and really just letting you know that there is a difference, and we'll talk more about what that is a little later on in the semester. But one of you mentioned violent acts by people demonstrating around the country right now in some of America's larger cities who are having different types of demonstrations and protests. Some of them are committing acts of violence. You ask whether those would be charged as federal or state crimes. Great question, and I'm going to take that in two different directions, two different perspectives. I'll talk about both a person, let's say a person who is a protester, who is a member of an organized or disorganized demonstration, demonstrating against police brutality, racism, and so forth. And what happened? What happened if they were charged with a crime of vandalism or violence as part of the protest? And then, also, what about police officers? What about members of law enforcement when they commit unnecessary acts of violence against people taking part in those protests? It's a complicated situation, and it's a controversial situation. If you don't believe me, just get on social media, and if you can, look at the posts by people who are not necessarily your friends or your followers on there, people who you don't agree with a lot of the times, and you'll see what a divisive issue this has become. This is we've had intermittent demonstrations, and peaceful and violent demonstrations in this country throughout our history, but not since the summer of 1968 has it been done on this level and from coast to coast. That being said, to address your classmate's question directly, if someone is taking part in a protest or demonstration in a public place, and they assault another protester, they assault a police officer, they commit an act of vandalism or theft against a private property that is in the whatever city or area they're protesting, those are usually going to be state charges. So you brought up on charges of assault and battery, theft, vandalism. Those are state laws, state criminal laws that define those things. Look at the other side, though. If a member of law enforcement decides to detain, restrain, neutralize a protester or participant in a demonstration, that can get complicated, because there are laws allowing. In fact, the Constitution itself vaguely allows the government to exercise police power, law enforcement activities against its own citizens. But how much is too much? What does someone need to be doing to legally justify law enforcement? I'm not saying ethically or morally justify, I'm saying legally justify law enforcement being violent towards that civilian? It's a great question. I think it depends on who you ask. It certainly depends on what judge the case ends up before, because judges have very strong and differing opinions on those things. But as far as the law itself, it just depends. You could be charged with an officer could be charged with a state crime, just like anyone else can, assault, battery, those kind of things. But it may be it can at times, law enforcement actions be a violation of a civilian's civil rights, which can become a federal issue. And we'll talk more about that later in the semester. It has to do with the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments to the Constitution, and all rights that are supposedly granted to or recognized for all Americans. So, sorry that wasn't an exact answer, but it's an important thing to discuss, and we'll talk more about it later. And don't hesitate in your comments to videos or any other communication with me. If you want to ask about what's going on right now, don't hesitate to ask. If I think, I'll do my best to keep my opinions on the civil unrest in this country with a tone and type of language that are appropriate for a classroom setting, as if we were in an actual classroom. But these are controversial times, and we're going to be feeling the repercussions of 2020 for many, many years to come. That's the one thing I know for sure. If you want to have more questions or discussion about that, just post in the comments below. And don't forget to post in the comments below this video that you watched the video. That's how I know. There are some of you, I'm guessing probably aren't watching this, but people I'm getting ready to say, but there's some people who have not logged in to Canvas this semester and have not commented on the videos. And so the college has been asking me to report back on that. So if you have commented on a video, or if you have communicated with me through email or Canvas in some way, I let the college know that you are participating in this class. If you're not doing those things, none of those things, then the college and I don't know that you're participating. So please comment below the video. And thank you all for doing that so far and for continuing to watch the videos. Okay, moving on to the topic of the day, the judicial branch of the federal government. As I've said before, there are 3 branches of the federal government: legislative, executive, and judicial. Their main responsibilities are outlined in the United States Constitution. But of course, it's more complicated than that. The Constitution is not a very long document. And while today a lot of laws and statutes can be too long, too much detail, the Constitution could have used a little bit more. Unlike the executive and certainly legislative branches that involve so directly, at the time of the founding of this nation, directly many of the controversies and compromises around the institution of slavery, judicial branch doesn't really get into that in the Constitution. Now, in practice, judicial branch was just as involved with the issue of slavery as anything else, and the judicial branch is just as involved with the issue of civil rights today as the executive and legislative branches are. In fact, sometimes the judicial branch is even more involved than the other 2 branches when it comes to matters of civil rights and liberties. So, judiciary, judicial branch, federal courts, that all means the same thing. What do? They have lots of responsibilities under the Constitution and under the law, but the main thing I want you to learn about the judicial branch for the purpose of this class and the purpose of your first quiz coming up. That's just next week. I know it's on the 14th, so coming up in 2 weeks. The main thing I want you to know about the judicial branch of the federal government is that it is their job to interpret the Constitution. They interpret the Constitution. What does that mean? Does that mean they read the Constitution and tell us what it means? Yeah, but it's more than that. When other branches of government make new laws, the judicial branch has the responsibility of determining whether those laws are within the guidelines of the Constitution or whether they violate the Constitution. So, let's say Congress passes a law signed by the president that says From henceforth there shall be a king of the United States, and that king shall have all powers and responsibilities of government. Somebody would file a lawsuit. It would go to the federal courts. Federal courts would go, well, no, the Constitution says we have a president and we have a legislature. We don't have a king. So, no, that's unconstitutional. That statute violates the Constitution. And there is a hierarchy of laws in the United States. At the very top of that hierarchy is the United States Constitution. Right under that are statutes passed by Congress, signed into law by the president, or vetoed and overridden. But statutes come below the Constitution. No law, including statutes, can violate the Constitution. Who gets to decide what is and what is not a violation of the Constitution? The federal courts. The federal courts get to decide. Furthermore, if you have a law that's already on the books, a law that has been that does not violate the Constitution, that is a good and valid law, and people are violating it, it's the federal courts that decide whether or not that violation of a federal law is whether activities are indeed a violation of federal law or not. I keep saying federal courts. What are the federal courts? There are 3 levels of the federal courts. If one of you sues me for some reason, you sue me tomorrow, and it's a federal lawsuit, you want to sue me in federal court, not state court, federal court, you'd be suing me in the Western District of Kentucky, most likely, because we both live, certainly I do, and most of you live in Louisville. And Louisville's in Kentucky, and there are 2 district courts, federal district courts in Kentucky, and you'd be suing me in a federal district court. Let's say you win the lawsuit, and me and my lawyers, we don't like that. We want to appeal that lawsuit. We want to appeal the verdict in your favor. We can appeal to the 6th Circuit Court of Appeals. So you have federal district courts. You have federal circuit courts. What's after that? You may have actually heard of this one. In fact, I hope you've heard of this one. It's the United States Supreme Court. So let's say the 6th Circuit Court of Appeals, they agree with me. They say, Mr. Gray, you're right. You're right. Your student who sued you was wrong, and that's how we're going to send this case back down to the district court and let them sort out the verdict. You don't like that, so you're going to appeal. You're going to appeal to the United States Supreme Court. That is the most powerful federal court, and because of their role in interpreting the Constitution, they're the most powerful single court of any level in the United States. Who's on the Supreme Court? We talked about Congress, we talked about the president. Congress is directly elected. Members of Congress have an election. The candidate gets the most votes. They go on to represent that district or that state in Congress. The president, a little more complicated than that. I talked some about the Electoral College. Y'all let me know if you want to hear more about that, because Electoral College is very complicated and I could talk about it all day long. But for now, just suffice to say, there's an election for president, and most of the time in our history, the vast majority of the time, the candidate with the most votes becomes president. For the purpose of this conversation, just know that Congress, directly elected, president, also elected by the people in a manner of speaking, but not federal judges. All federal judges, from district court to appeals courts to the U.S. Supreme Court, are nominated by the president and confirmed by the Senate. The Senate gets to vote on the president's nominees to federal court. You may have heard in the news over the years about Supreme Court justices being appointed by the president, confirmed by the Senate, but it's true for all of them. I mentioned how there's a federal Western District of Kentucky, a federal court that sits or meets in Louisville. They meet downtown on Broadway, and well, they did before COVID. I don't know where they're probably meeting on Zoom now. I really don't know, but the federal courthouse is downtown on Broadway in Louisville. There's also one in Lexington. There's one in Cincinnati. I can keep going, but one in Paducah, Kentucky as well. But those federal judges who live here in Louisville, there's a few of them, they're appointed by some president, either this one or a previous one, and then they're confirmed by the Senate. Same thing for the appeals court. And then the same thing for the Supreme Court. There are 9 members of the Supreme Court. got to have that odd number in case they disagree. An odd number means you should, if they all vote, have a majority in every case, one way or the other. And majority wins. Majority wins. I think I made a passing reference in a previous video to the one Supreme Court case, which was, I think I mentioned Dred Scott versus Sanford, which is arguably, certainly in my opinion, the worst Supreme Court opinion ever. But it was the law. It became the law because there was no congressional statute or executive order or any other type of law that said that answered the legal question that Dred Scott posed to the court back in the 1800s. And so until the statutes changed, that became the law. That's another thing that's maybe the second most important thing you should know about the federal courts is that their opinions, which is that's what when you have a case and they issue their verdict, they issue a written statement. That statement of their opinion is a type of law. It is a type of law. There are many, 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 many cases where attorneys, lawyers, they're trying to figure out what the law says in order to help their clients, and there's no language in the Constitution about it. There's no federal statute, regulation, or executive order about it. And so they find the answer in judicial opinions. Judicial opinions are a type of law. So with that, I'm going to wrap this up pretty soon for today. And then tomorrow, since I'm a day behind this week, so tomorrow we'll have a lecture due, and I'll make sure I get it done by midnight tomorrow, so we'll be back on schedule. And I'm actually going to spend a little more time talking about these types of laws. We've now covered the 3 branches of federal government. There's a little more you might want to know, a little more you need to know about how they operate, about how they make the laws that govern our lives. As I told you in the first lecture for this semester, the things that these politicians and other types of policymakers like judges and bureaucrats, the things that they do, the laws that they make, they impact you and me, whether we know it or not. So if you are willfully ignorant, knowing that these things are happening in the government, but you just don't care to learn about it, that's your right. As an American, no one should be able to force you to learn these things. But if you don't, these things will impact your life anyway. You, your family, your community, whether you like it or not. So it's best to know about these things, to know about these laws and these governmental processes that impact you and the people you care about. With that, I'm going to wrap it up. I think I've addressed all the questions y'all have asked in YouTube comments so far, but please don't hesitate. Like I said, it doesn't have to just be about class. If you want to, as long as it's related to American government and politics in some way, I will address it in these videos. As long as it's appropriate for a classroom environment, I will address it in these videos. So thank you all for joining me today. Thanks for watching, listening to the video, and comment below that you watched the video, and I will give you your attendance credit for this class. Thank you so much.